I would like to give you, as pointed out, a view from industry perspective, from a company perspective, on the development of the urban environment, and how important it is, and therefore how important it is to develop the 100 smart cities within India. Let me just give you on 2 slides an impression what Siemens is about. We are a company with close to 350,000 people working worldwide. We have an order intake of more than 80 billion. We are running our businesses based on 9 divisions, plus our Siemens Financial Services, a bank. Out of those, 3 divisions on the left side are covering power generation from fossil fuels like gas and coal, but also wind, renewables. The other 3 in the middle, about energy management, mobility and building, are covering what we call infrastructure, which is basically what cities are made of. It's buildings, it's about mobility, it's about energy. Then we have 2 divisions which are covering industry automation, driving productivity in industries. Industry 4.0 is maybe one of the buzzwords you hear all the way. We are a leader in driving this. And on the upper right side, you see our healthcare business. So this is now our global setup. Just to give an impression about India, how it looks like in India. So we are in India since more than 150 years. You see on the map the impressive footprint. So we are employing 16,000 people. The number is increasing. The growth or the productivity was driven with 60% by labor productivity in India, compared to China, which was 90. So there's a huge potential going forward to see how we can drive productivity out of the massive amount of a young people's generation. By the way, talking about a generation which is young, where Chinese labor market peaked in 2014 already, so it's declining now. Chinese population in total is going to decline within the next some 10 years. India has a young population which is continuous growing. Why I'm saying it, why is it so important? Because a growing population is one of the sustainable growth drivers of economies. By the way, another one is urbanization, and I come to that in a minute. And last but not least, and this is really a point I would like to make, and which is luckily addressed by the new government, not only in terms of 100 smart cities, but also in a clear focus on investing in infrastructure. The way how economies are developing, you can go for cities which are developing or countries, is always the same. It starts with energy. Without energy, nothing comes next. Second, infrastructure. You need a proper infrastructure in order to build then the secondary sector of industrialization, followed by more quality of life, which is the healthcare sector. Of course, India is so big and has such a broad development that these phases are going concurrently, but still we believe that the market, the first one, the energy and the infrastructure market, are at that phase of point in time the most important ones. Whereas India invested a little bit above 3.5, if I remember correctly. So, and for the next 20 years, China is continuing on that level. So that means, for me, it's a clear strategic direction of governments to get the infrastructure in order to really let them harvest and let economies grow. It's a must. Without that, you will not see any movement. And then, of course, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about cities as well. As I said also, there's one growth driver, sustainable growth driver for economies, which is increasing population. A second one is industrial productivity. We talk about digitalization, Industry 4.0. And the third one is urbanization. Why so? Because an urban environment is the most effective and efficient way to provide infrastructure for people. We talk about roads or transport, energy, healthcare, education, culture. There's no other way. You have to have this kind of urbanization in order to drive growth, which is for me one of the big topics, because thinking about an increasing speed of urbanization is scary for many people, because if not well managed, you really end up in a mess. And it starts with transport. This, by the way, reflects my discussions with mayors all around the world. Is it for emerging cities or mature cities? We always talk the same. We start with the biggest problem, how to move people and goods within a city. Huge problem, and I will come in a couple of minutes in more detail on this one. Second one is about energy, reliable energy supply, which is mandatory in order to really address, as I said, the next level of industry. The next one is about emissions, and we don't talk, very often we talk about CO2 emissions on a global base. What's coming more and more in focus is the local emission. The local emissions, which makes the air sometimes so bad that you really don't want your family to live there. And in particular, the 2.5 microns particle, which are mainly driven by transport, is another area which is rather scary. Water usage and waste are the next topic. And last but not least, when we are closing, then we talk about the quality of life. And here, in particular, about security. Security is a hot topic, in particular for talents. Talents can choose where they live, and they don't want to live in a place where they have to fear about their lives. So security is a strategic, important lever of a city, which makes a city sustainable grow and growing in a healthy way. So what we did in order to support from a Siemens and German perspective, this 100 Smart Cities development, we formed a consortium with the Indian industry, and we had a couple of companies joining us. You can read the names, also Indian companies. And our idea was to provide a kind of an comprehensive approach, how we would address cities. The topics which we want to address are listed up on the upper half of this chart. It's about electricity, about reliable electricity, it's about efficient transport, sustainable development in the environment, security and safety, and so on, housing, affordable housing. And we want to make that also a local touch. Because believe me or not, a smart city in India looks different from a smart city in Germany or a smart city in the United States or somewhere else. You need to have to develop your own way how Indian smart cities are going. And my interpretation of a smart city in India is a livable, sustainable, growing city. This is for me the headline. The headline is not about technology. The headline is about a sustainable, growing, livable city. If you achieve that with your 100 Smart Cities program, you can take it off and that you did a good job. Of course, it has to be supported by proper planning at the first instance, financing, choosing the right technologies, choosing the right partners, also in PPP models, in order to really invest the money wisely at the right spot and execute your projects properly. That's what we try to support based on the experiences which Siemens and the companies mentioned on that chart made together with other cities around the world, and to bring that expertise into your 100 Smart City program. Maybe allow me one technical slide, which I believe is important to understand the topic of infrastructure 4.0. Very often people, when talk about industry 4.0, they mean manufacturing industry 4.0, which is nothing but bringing more and more IT technology in driving productivity for manufacturing. Actually can talk about exactly the same for infrastructure. There is a trend of using more and more technology, connectivity, smart devices, using more data analytics in the infrastructure area. And it's a very, very important element. Why? The picture explains to you that 80 to 90% of the money you spend sits on concrete, sits on the field devices, the rolling stock or the streets. This is a lot of money. If you put an incremental of 10 to 20% in terms of automation and digitalization, of making your infrastructure smart, you can have a big leverage on resilience, on the capacity which you installed, on the efficiency which you run it. And in order to make that a little bit more clear and transparent, I give you a couple of examples what I mean by making infrastructure more smart. From the left, in Paris, we re-equipped one line number 1, which is the most busy line in Paris. We changed from driver to driverless. The same line, the same amount of stations, today runs 50% more people. This is what automation can do to an existing infrastructure. In Gurgaon, we had 30,000 passengers, which are running on a very, very safe system, and we ensure a headway time of 90 seconds. Maharashtra, we are investing Maharashtra is investing into smart grids to make the grid more stable and resilient after having experienced a blackout for 100 million of people for hours or even days. You can make the system smarter. You might have a blackout, but you recover much, much faster, or you can even prevent it in making your system more smart. And on the other one, talking about buildings, by the way, buildings are emitting, as you said, 2/3 of the emissions. They are consuming 2/3 of the world's energy. You can make these buildings also more intelligent, run them smart. We took, as an example, Taipei 101, where our engineers, and this is not really an old building, it's a modern building, but our engineers were running into it and looking how they can optimize it. This building is today the most greenest skyscraper in the world, high-rise building in the world. It consumes 30% less compared to the other buildings or the building as it was built. So there's a lot of opportunity if you really deploy technologies in the right way. But I promised to you to focus a little bit on mobility, and this goes back to my discussions with a lot of mayors who asked me, could you give me an argument which I can go to my government with in order to make them invest in my city in a new metro line? Why do you need an argument? Because there's no metro in the world, there's maybe one exception, could be Hong Kong, there's still questions about it, which is running a positive business case. All metros in the world are subsidized. So why would you then invest? Okay, then turn it around. Can you imagine London to be London, New York to be New York, Delhi to be Delhi, or Beijing to be Beijing as it is today without the metro? No way. If it would take the metro away, these metropolitan areas, which are, by the way, covering most of the GDP worldwide, the top 500 cities in the world covering more than 50% of the GDP, growing faster than the average GDP. Can you imagine that happens without a metro? So there must be a business case somewhere which is driving growth and which is really supporting. So what was the idea? The idea was that together with an institute called Credo, we developed a study which makes it a little bit more transparent. Where is the business case? Where's the business case of investing in a metro line or in public transport in an urban environment? The idea is very simple. Consider a city to be infrastructure for people and to make this whole people work and be productive. Productive in terms of working, productive in terms of spending their money privately. This is the basic idea, and the longer they are sitting in cars, are not productive, the more you lose. So you're losing productivity if people commute for 2 hours. Very easy to understand. What we did is we calculated these unproductive hours for 35 cities worldwide. And what we found out is that the gap between the good ones and the bad ones is losing productivity of 9%, like for cities like Singapore or Hong Kong, which goes up to 30% in cities like Jakarta or Lagos. So 30% of your GDP is lost in terms of missing productivity because you shuffle people around for hours from A to B. This is the business case. This is the business case for investing in metro lines. And as I said, as I wrote on that chart, the benefit could be as high for these cities which we analyzed, 35 cities, by the way, worldwide, could be as high as $800 billion. Now I give you an example of smart investment, and you would ask, what is the payback time based on these considerations? I give you 2 examples, and then I talk a little bit about Mumbai and Delhi. On the one side is Paris. Paris decided to invest $36 billion for the next 15 years in order to increase their total capacity by 20%. Based on the consideration which we made, losing productivity or gaining productivity, by the way, in Paris, they are losing 14% of the GDP in people traveling around. The payback time is 10 years. For infrastructure investment, I would say people from the lending area would not hesitate a minute investing in that business case. Looks a little bit different for Beijing. Beijing is already not bad. They're losing 11% of productivity. They will increase the capacity by 80%, catering for an ever-increasing urbanization. Beijing is growing like hell. It's growing so fast that they try now to combine Beijing with the surroundings. They call it Qingqingji, which is making a real big city out of it. They're investing 20 billion for the next also 6 years. Payback time is 22 years, but still, it's a strategic investment. If you want to get some ideas how it looks like for Delhi, with 22.7 million people, Delhi is losing 16% of their GDP in people shuffling around, which is actually not that bad. Mumbai, 22. In Mumbai, and everybody who knows Mumbai knows what I'm talking about. This is really a lot of traffic problems. And what we believe is that if that, by the way, the peak commuter numbers is doubling within the next 15 years. It's doubling, so the problem does not go away. It's getting worse. So if you don't do anything, you will see that Delhi and Mumbai will be held back in terms of their development and how they grow. So I believe that there's a lot of opportunities. The Indian government is on the right track. I think I appreciate very much this collaboration between India and Germany. We have a lot to offer also in terms of technology, experience in cities. And by the way, if you very often say you cannot compare a German city with an Indian one, that's true. But on the other side, if you look at the basic mechanisms, how you develop infrastructure, how you make it smarter, how you make it more productive, the basic mechanisms are the same. You need a local touch, and we have local people engaged in order to really provide dedicated solution for your needs, for your budget, for your kind of starting point, in order to really make your 100 smart cities, developing quickly and contributing to the development of the economy of India. To conclude, I have to say that a proper planning and developing is important, as in every big project. You need to focus on the infrastructure, which is one of the enablers of really making India's economy growing sustainably, making this infrastructure investment more smart, intelligent, so adding this maybe 10% of incremental spendings on make it really modern, automate it, digitalize it, is worthwhile, the effort, absolutely. It reduces your cycle time at the same time. And last but not least, on a personal note, and from Siemens, we are committed to contribute. We are hopefully staying for another 150 years, and our researchers, engineers, and our management is stand by and working very hard to support you in your program. Thank you very much.